When it comes to fishing, the spinning reel is probably the most widely used fishing reel in the world. Now, with that being said, the spinning reel can also lead to a lot of frustration with line jumping off the spool, wind knots, and complete bird's nests. So in this video, I really want to talk about 5 big mistakes, not only with your spinning reel, but your entire spinning combo that I wish I would have known a long time ago. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by my fishing apparel company, Finn Fishing. At Finn Fishing, I have a number of different products, including one of the only USA-made sun shirts out there on the market. Now, right now for the month of June 2024, I'm actually running a package deal. You can get a USA-made sun shirt, a pair of sun gloves, and a hat with a wooden bass badge, all for $84 plus free shipping. All you have to do is add the sun shirt that you like to cart, add the sun gloves you want to cart, add the hat you want to cart, and it will automatically discount at checkout. I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description. Shopping at Finn Fishing is truly the best way to help support this channel, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, before we talk about the 5 big spinning combo mistakes, I want to talk about a few gimmies, but things that you should definitely know, especially if you are newer to using a spinning outfit. The first one is a spinning reel is meant to go on the bottom of your rod. If you have your spinning reel on top of your rod and you're actually reeling backwards to bring that line in, you're kind of telling me you don't know a lot about fishing without telling me you don't know a lot about fishing.
100% Mother Nature. Get that! I'm upstairs, baby!
Now, with that being said, we've all been there before, so just make sure you flip that on the bottom. Now, the second gimme is when you make a cast out there, always flip the bail manually by hand. Never just start reeling. If you are making casts with a spinning combo and you're just reeling it as soon as it hits the water, that's going to lead to a lot of future frustrations, which we will talk about now in the big 5 mistakes. Now, mistake number 1 when it comes to a spinning outfit is not knowing how to feather the spool. A lot of times when we think about feathering a spool, you think about a bait caster. When you make a long cast with a bait caster, you're able to put your thumb on that spool so you can kind of slow that lure down in the air, which comes in really handy when it comes to casting in and around cover. Now, with that being said, I've seen a lot of people get in my boat over the years. They make a cast, their bait is about to hit into the trees, and they just click that reel over in order to stop it. Now, like I said, clicking that reel over and not manually flipping the bail is going to lead to a lot of future issues, but you can also simply slow down your bait a lot like you do with a bait caster. It's just a little bit different in the way that you do it. So what I like to do is really feather the line. When I make a cast with a spinning rod, I will actually kind of keep my hand right below the line, and I actually allow that line to hit on the palm of my hand. Now, if my bait is starting to go too far and I want to slow it down, I will simply close the grip of my hand onto that line, and I can manually slow that line down in my hand. Now, not only can you slow your line down to make sure you don't get hung in a tree, but I also like to do this to make sure that my lure doesn't come splashing hard into the water, which can at times scare a lot of fish. Now, the more that you do this, the more accurate you're going to be, the more you're going to get a feel for exactly what you need to do. The best thing you can do is just start casting, feathering that line with your hand and slowing it down just like you do with a bait caster. Now, the second big mistake actually comes to spooling line on your spinning reel. Now, spooling line on a spinning reel, if you do it the wrong way, you are going to have so much line twist that your rod and reel will actually be unusable at times, creating a lot of bird's nests and a lot of wind knots. Now, unfortunately, the bad thing is there's no perfect way of putting line onto a spinning reel. And the biggest reason is because your spinning reel spool and the line spool that you're using are almost always different in size. And this particular spool of line is probably at least twice the size of my spinning spool size. Now, because these are 2 different sizes, there's always going to be a little bit of line twist when spooling your line. Now, a few ways that you can help eliminate some of that line twist is 1, have the line come off your spool in a counterclockwise direction. Now, I think that pretty much every single spinning reel out there on the market will actually spin clockwise. So you want the line coming off your spool to be going the opposite way. The best way to really remember this is if I point my spinning reel directly at my spool of line and I start reeling line off, you will see that it comes off my spool line very smoothly and going on the exact same way as my spinning reel. Now, if the line is actually coming off your spool line clockwise, you can see how this is almost going the opposite direction, which creates a lot of line twist. The other thing that I will do often if I'm putting mono or fluorocarbon onto a spinning reel is I'm going to use a line and lure conditioner. This one has Kevin Van Dam's name on it, and pretty much anything with his name on it works really well. So if you do these things and you are still having some issues with line twist, what you can do is take your spool off of your reel and stick it in a warm bucket of water and just let it soak for a little while. To me, I have found that this is one of the best ways to help eliminate some of that line twist. Now, you can obviously do everything that I just said, but if you're like me, what also might be the best alternative is actually simply using braided fishing line. Because of the way that braided fishing line is made, the material it is made on, it can actually twist a lot more without it actually impacting the line, unlike mono or fluoro, because once mono and fluoro twist, you really start to see them kind of kink up. Now, when I put braid onto my spinning reel, I still make sure that that line is coming off my spool in a counterclockwise direction, but I don't really worry about line conditioner and I don't put it in warm water after the fact. Now, a little side note when it comes to spooling braid on your spinning reel is I actually use a backing on my spinning reels a lot like I do bait cast reels. Now, the main reason that I do that is because I do not want to waste that expensive braided fishing line. Braid is super thin in diameter, so you can actually put hundreds of yards even on a smaller spool. For example, this Gravity 5 reeled by Arc actually says on the side of it that it will hold 250 yards of 20-pound braid. Now, look, I'm not fishing in the ocean for the most part, so there's no reason for me to put that much line onto a spinning rod. I am simply never going to use it. And because I like to keep my spools very full, I will actually use a backing to kind of take up some of the line that is on that spool. For example, I use 10-pound Power Pro braid a lot on my spinning reels. This particular reel could probably hold over 300 yards of 10-pound braid if I wanted it to. But most of the time, especially bass fishing like I do, I'm gonna make about 100-foot cast at most, which is only about 30 to 40 yards. So what I like to do with my spinning reels is I like to have about 100 to 150 yards of braid on that spinning reel. So when I'm spooling up this line, I'm gonna first attach some random monofilament. I'm gonna fill that spool about half full, and then I'm going to attach my braid with an Alberto knot and finish spooling my braid all the way up to the brim. Now, if you're putting braid on your spinning reel, I highly suggest leaving only about a 1/16 inch of a gap between where your braid is and the outside of your spinning reel. Now, if you're using monofilament or fluorocarbon, I'd make that gap a little bit bigger, somewhere around 1/8 of an inch. Mono and fluoro has a tend to jump off the spool if you over spool that line. So that's why I want to leave a little bit more of a gap. But to me, the smaller that gap is, the better the casting distance that you're going to have. So that's why I like to leave it as small as I can. Now, on the end of my braid, I'm typically going to attach a fluorocarbon or monofilament leader of some sort. There's a lot of different leader knots out there on the market. I'm actually going to leave a link down below in the description. I did a test and actually figured out what the exact best leader knot is, and I will leave that down below as well as at the end of this video. Now, mistake number 3 is actually not knowing how the line choice that you go with is going to impact the rod choice that you should go with. A lot of times when you are using a straight mono or a straight fluorocarbon on your spinning reel, there is a lot of line stretch. Even with fluorocarbon, fluorocarbon will stretch just about as much as monofilament. So with that being said, with having so much line stretch, if I'm using straight mono or straight fluoro, I actually like to go with more of a fast action rod. That fast action rod allows me to drive the hooks in in a little bit better in fish, especially at a long cast. Now, with that being said, if you're like me and you actually like to fish a braid to fluoro or monofilament leader, what's actually best to do is select a rod that has a little bit more of a parabolic bend. So I really like to have more of a moderate action rod when I'm using braid. The thing about braid is it has zero stretch, but when you set the hook on a fish, especially with lighter line, which we use often with spinning rod and reels, you need to have some give somewhere in your system. And since your line isn't providing that give for you, the rod actually needs to provide that give for you. So if you're going to use braid to a fluorocarbon leader, I really suggest more of those moderate bending rods. Now, I'm not saying that you absolutely can't use a fast action rod. You're just going to have to mess a little bit with your drag, which we'll talk about drag in just a minute. Now, the fourth mistake that a lot of anglers make with their spinning combos is not knowing how to properly get loops out of their line. Remember earlier how we talked about you should never just start reeling after you make a cast? The reason being is that when you do that, a lot of times you will throw a small loop into your reel. Now, those small loops may look like nothing, especially after you get a few wraps of line on them, but what ends up happening is you go to make a long bomb cast and all of a sudden you have 3 different lines coming out of your spinning reel. Now, with that being said, even if you are manually closing the bail with your hand, sometimes you are just fishing where your line is a little bit more slack, and there can be random loops that develop within your spool. Now, if you happen to notice one of these loops in your spool, you don't want to try to cast it out. Sometimes I will make a small pitch to get some line off of it, but once I get close to that particular loop, I'm simply going to loosen my drag up all the way and start pulling my line out by hand. A lot of times, even if that loop starts to kind of come out with your line, you can actually click your bail over and keep pulling that line out, and it will completely pull that loop out. This is something that I believe I learned from Skeet Reese like a number of years ago, and it has saved me so many times out there on the water from having to completely cut all my line out and start completely from scratch. Now, mistake number 5 is not setting your drag properly. I live up in the northern part of the country and I fish for a lot of smallmouth. I've probably caught thousands of smallmouth, and smallmouth will pull your drag out unlike any other fish except for maybe those saltwater beasts. Now, with that being said, the drag on spinning reels is very, very smooth these days. Now, depending on what type of fishing you are doing, what species of fish that you are fishing for, what pound test you have on your particular spinning reel, the amount at which you set your drag is going to vary a little bit. Now, because I've been using kind of the same system for a number of years, I can simply pull that line by hand, and I typically know exactly kind of the sweet spot that works for me. When I set the hook on a fish, I do not want a ton of drag to slip, but I do typically want a little bit of drag to slip on the hook set. And with that being said, the hook set with most of my spinning rod and reels is typically more of a reel hook set. I'm gonna kind of point that rod and reel at that fish when it starts taking it, and then I'm just kind of reel and slowly lift up. That tends to be the best with a lot of the finesse gear that I'm using these days. Now, while I don't want too much drag to slip off when I set the hook, as soon as I hook into a fish, especially if it's a bigger fish, what I do typically do is I'm going to actually turn my drag a quarter turn, about no more than a quarter. And while I'm bringing that fish in, that just gives this fish a little bit more when it tries to make a lot of those digs, especially, like I said, smallmouth that are gonna dig a lot and constantly at the boat. Now, this is going to take a little bit of effort and a little bit of practice on your end to really kind of find that sweet spot with your drag. But I can promise you, the more fishing that you do, you will kind of find that sweet spot. Over the years, I have really learned to trust the drag of my spinning reel. I think it is the best way to ensure that you land the most amount of fish. Now, with that being said, the one other really important component, especially if you use a braid to fluoro or a braid to mono, is that knot, that leader knot. And if you do not know the best leader knot to tie, I actually did a full video that I'm gonna leave linked right here. And all I did was test out the best knots and ended up finding the best leader knot out there. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think you will like this one. Also, don't forget to check out Fin Fishing right here. I will see you guys in the next one.